What is going on, everyone? Welcome into Big Time Football Talk. So I wanted to talk top edge rushers 2023 NFL Draft. Starting with number 5, it's Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. And there's a lot to like about Foskey. First off, he's 6'5", 265 pounds. And this is a guy that had a really good career at Notre Dame. Ended up being the all-time sack leader in Fighting Irish history. So, Foskey, a combination of, size, competitiveness. I mean, there's a lot to like about Foskey. There's not really anything lacking necessarily from his game. Struggles to hold anchor a little bit in the run game. Does get moved back a bit. Does get blocked by tight ends, which was a little alarming. But there's so many good things to like about Foskey that kind of trump some of the minor flaws in his game. And to me, Foskey just seems like a guy that you'll pencil in, probably will go early third round. So, middle of the day, day 2, so a Friday night pick. But you got to leave. One NFL team is going to really like Foskey and think that he's a guy that's just, too good a value probably in the third round, maybe late second. Very good value there. And to me, he's a guy that's got solid starter written all over him. But, you might be thinking, hey, Brant, with the way you're talking about him, maybe shouldn't he be probably a little bit lower than 5? And that's a good question, because I would say in most years he would be a lot lower. I think this edge rushing class was a little weaker than I thought. But, with Foskey, a lot of times in the NFL draft, especially with a guy like this, if you get him late second, early third, a solid starter is, there's nothing wrong with getting a solid starter. I mean, I think you got to take a step back. Most guys fall into the middle. Most guys are solid starters in the NFL. You can't draft an elite guy. You can't always draft an elite, all pro, multi-Pro Bowl guy in the late second, third round. You need a guy like Isaiah Foskey, a guy with, it sounds like no character issues that's going to come in and get after it and really work hard. And I think Foskey fits that mold well. This is a guy that I'm not sure how he's going to interview or how teams are going to like him. But, you get a feel that he'll come into training camp day 1, ready to work, ready to get better. And it's a guy that's really going to, do some nice things, even if he starts out as a rotational guy. But, pretty good body overall. I mean, he's fairly lean. I think he could add some muscle, especially in the lower body. Does have a frame where you could pack on some muscle and then maybe lean him, get him a little leaner. But, I mean, as far as he does have, he's limited as far as power is concerned. I think he's a guy that's going to struggle with some of like the more elite tackles in the NFL. I mean, I guess what edge rusher doesn't, but as far as versatility goes, this is a guy that you can stand him up. He even played some off-ball linebacker. They blitzed him a little bit at Notre Dame. So Foskey, a good football player nonetheless, and a guy I like, and that's why, as far as, a lot of things to like, something like I touched on, the ability, getting blocked by tight ends, not necessarily holding ground in the run game, not always being super dominant. When you hear all-time sack leader at Notre Dame, you initially picture a guy that was probably pretty dominant. I mean, even though he had some good games, he was never a guy that, teams were really scared of, in my opinion. They never really had to do anything necessarily special as far as like chipping him, double team, stuff like that. So Foskey comes in at number 5. I think, when it's all said and done, you look back on Foskey's NFL career as a solid starter and a pretty good player, and I think you're looking at a late second, early third round pick like I touched on. So next guy, that's where it gets fun. It's Nolan Smith out of Georgia. If you remember, Nolan Smith was a top recruit coming out of high school. Maybe 2 or 3, depending on what service you look at. But 24/7 Sports had him rated as the number 1 recruit out of high school, even ahead of Thibodeau and Derek Stingley if you go back to the 2019 class. I mean, what stands out about Nolan Smith? Glad you asked. Great athlete. Very good athlete. I mean, this is a guy that, quick twitch, his movement skills are very good. And you see a lot of the intangibles of what made him a number 1 recruit come out of high school. 6'3", maybe 6'4", 235 pounds, plays a lot bigger than that. 22 years of age. I love his play style. He competes. His hands are always active. His feet are always active. He's a guy that's really giving it his all, and he's a guy that really has good instincts and does a good job of reading where plays are going, can diagnose, read options, and screen plays quickly and go and run down ball carriers. He's gonna have no problem tackling some like the Lamar Jacksons of the world in open space. So yeah, I really do like Nolan Smith's game. He's a fourth year senior, like I touched on. A very good body. He's very lean. I mean, this guy is 6-pack abs, super chiseled, and he played very well in some big games against Michigan in the playoff. Did some nice things against Alabama in both games, in the SEC title game and in the national championship game. So, this is a guy that's not afraid of the big moment. I thought he really battled Evan Neal well in the SEC championship game. And that was you look at him and you look at Evan Neal, it's a huge size difference. And he did a terrific job of just battling and competing and getting after it. And, he's Smith last year and even this year, kind of the forgotten about guy. I mean, last year, with all the studs they had in Walker, Wyatt, Jordan Davis, and then this year, Jalen Carter gets all the talk of the defensive line. Nolan Smith, that forgotten about guy, but a guy that, credit that he didn't transfer, was not playing a lot early in his career at Georgia, stuck to it, just kept getting better, and really shined this year before he had the injury later in the season, which caused him to miss both playoff games in the national. It caused him to miss the SEC championship game and the playoff games, and then a couple regular season games. But credit Nolan Smith. I think whoever drafts him is going to get a guy that works, a guy that's tough, intelligent, a guy that's I think this is a guy that could start right away. I'm not sure if he will. I think that he does have some upside to him. I don't think this is a guy that will consistently be a double-digit sack guy, but I think he will be a starter in the National Football League, and I think he will do a lot of great things for whoever drafts him. And, Nolan Smith may not be everyone's cup of tea, just because, he's lacking as far. He's got good power, but he'll never be. I think what'll hold Nolan Smith back, like I touched on about being the double, he never will be that guy that could be, be the elite with both, with, the speed. He can win with speed and and they have some bend, but he'll never be the guy that'll be the dual threat as far as, beat a guy around the edge and or, win. He doesn't convert. I guess what I'm trying to say is he doesn't convert speed to power as well as I thought, but nonetheless, you're getting a good player with Nolan Smith, number 4 out of Georgia. Number 3, it's Luke Van Ness from Iowa. Van Ness from Iowa was a very pleasant surprise. I mean, this dude has some serious power. I mean, his ability he can really just demoralize guards. And I love how he uses his length to really, control. And then when he sees where the play is going, can just easily rip defenders off. His ability to just, get off of blocks using his upper body strength is incredible. I think this is a guy that's just a stone wall and just so hard to move. Does have the ability to hold his ground versus double teams. I mean, with his strength, he can demoralize tight ends. I mean, against centers, he's going to be the ultimate mismatch. I mean, he is a center's worst nightmare. Ability to, just can drive people back. Never started a game at Iowa, which is the big thing. But, it's not a concern because, he made the most of his snaps in that rotation. 6'5", 275. He's got a pretty good build. Could get a little leaner, but as far as he's got good muscle tone in the upper body and in the lower body, I don't think this is a guy that'll test out the charts at the combine, but he is he's going to be a darn good football player in the National Football League. And to me, I think Iowa was doing a disservice to themselves not playing this guy more, because every time he was in the game, the opposing offense was limited to a lot of checkdowns, and they just had a hard time dealing with this guy. He was getting quarterbacks that have to flush, they'd have to check it down. I think Iowa hurt themselves. I don't know what that would be. That's the question I would want answered if I'm going into interviews, is why he never started a single game at Iowa and why he didn't play more snaps. That's the number one question I want to get answered if I'm a scout or if an NFL GM when Luke Van Ness is concerned. So, this, I think he does have some upside in the NFL. I do see, I saw people commenting, comparing him to J.J. Watt. I'm not sure if he'll be that type of player. Peak J.J. Watt was incredible, but you see some of the power and the build, and a guy that's, kind of a late bloomer a little bit, as far as, this was not a guy that was like a big-time recruit and came in with a ton of hype. You see a guy that, very good, strength overall. And it's, when you're an offensive lineman in the NFL, it is going to be a let's roll up the sleeves, let's buckle up the chin strap type of day when you're dealing with Van Ness. And this is a guy that, if you've had to block for 3-4 quarters, it's really going to take a toll on an offensive lineman. And you get some team, there's going to be, maybe all 32 teams, but there's going to be a few teams that really fall in love with Luke Van Ness. And if you notice, a lot of mock drafts do have him going in the first round, and I would be all for it. Obviously, if he's graded out my number 3 edge rusher, I definitely have a mid first round, early first round grade on him. I love Luke Van Ness. I love his ability. I love what he can do as far as from a physicality standpoint, from an effort standpoint. You saw in the Ohio State game, he gave Paris Johnson all he could handle. Paris Johnson, we're going to talk about as one of the best offensive tackles in this draft, and he gave Paris Johnson a lot of problems in that game, and drilled C.J. Stroud a couple of times. Makes you wonder if they could have kept it a little closer if he was in this game, but I don't know what the Iowa coaching staff was seeing not playing this guy more, but I got to get off. I guess I got to get off that tangent. But yeah, Luke Van Ness, a guy I think that's going to get more hype as we go along, and he comes in as my number 3 edge rusher. He's number 91 out of Iowa. It's Luke Van Ness from Iowa. Number 2, it's Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. Tyree Wilson, like Luke Van Ness, I knew there was some hype around him. Wilson's a guy that's really rising in mock drafts and is going as, you see his go as high as like 5th to Seattle. I think that's probably where he ends up going. I'd love to see him go to number 6 to my Detroit Lions. But this is a guy, a former transfer from Texas A&M that's got length for days, 6'6", 275. This is a dude that just, like Van Ness, demoralizes guards, a complete mismatch for tight ends, just drive tight ends out of the play. He's 22 years old, 13 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks this past year in 2022. Is an outstanding tackler, can chase down ball carriers, quarterbacks. Really, there's nothing that Tyree Wilson can't do as far as the key ingredients that you're looking for in an edge rusher. There's a lot to like, a lot to love about Tyree Wilson's game, and he was always, like Van Ness, he was always disrupting offenses. He was constantly getting quarterbacks to flush the pocket and just creating havoc game in and game out for opposing offenses. But yeah, there was a lot of plays I had circled where he just completely, blew up plays. He's a true disruptor, and he does have ability to anchor in the run game. I mean, no one moves this guy. He can hold his ground versus double teams, and the power is very apparent when you watch Tyree Wilson. And he's a stud. Just does a great job of shedding blocks and can really shed blocks with some violence. He's number 19 for Texas Tech. A guy that does play reckless, and by reckless I mean that in a good way. He has no fear of pulling guards, pulling tight ends, coming at him, and I was super impressed with Tyree Wilson. He was a very pleasant surprise when I watched these guys. He was one of the first guys I actually watched, and I knew, when you hear Texas Tech guy, you get a little concerned right away, just because Texas Tech, they have not had the greatest history of producing a lot of defensive players. I mean, I think it's kind of ironic that he's projected to go fifth to Seattle, because Seattle has had luck with Texas Tech defensive player in recent years in Jordan Brooks, the linebacker. So yeah, you could they didn't play together, but Seattle, getting lucky with Texas Tech players, maybe they go back to that well and add Tyree Wilson. But yeah, to me, this is a guy that's a top 5 pick. He's top 10 quick pick, no question, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Love this guy's game. Love what he brings to the table. And I could go on and on again, but I'll keep it brief. That I'll sum it up with this: Wilson, in my book, a top 5 pick. I guarantee that he'll go top 10 in this NFL draft, and I'm super excited to see what he does at the combine. Excited to see what numbers he puts up. I think you will see some pretty good strength as far as the bench press if he chooses to compete in that. I don't know if he'll blow teams away in the 40, but I think he does have a good workout, and I think he is a guy that will shine in some of the drills on field. So that's what I wanted to say about Tyree Wilson. So let's get to number one. Number one, it's Will Anderson from Alabama. A big surprise here, I know. But Will Anderson, the competitiveness is off the charts, and this is a guy that stepped in at Alabama day one in 2020 and made a huge impact for the Crimson Tide. Was a key piece in 2020 in the national title team. Had a very dominant season last year in 2021 with 31 tackles for loss and 17 and a half sacks. Stat line dipped a bit this year, but you saw him just, taking on double teams, getting chipped by running backs, tight ends. You still saw the relentless motor. And even when he misses tackles and, just even when he, runs himself out of the play, being over-aggressive or misses tackles, he just keeps coming back and playing his tail off the next play. So I love Will Anderson's game. This is a guy that, whether you want his hand in the ground, whether you want him standing up, he can do both. This guy that has a good build. He's got a strong lower body. He's not like the biggest, thickest guy in the world, but he plays like Nolan Smith. He plays a lot stronger than he looks. And like I said, he's one of those guys where you turn on the Alabama tape and you really just see him flying around. He stands out right away. Coming into this year, he was the consensus number 1 pick in the draft. I think he still has a chance to go number 1, but it looks like, maybe it's Jalen Carter, maybe it's Bryce Young. Will Anderson is going to be a top 5 pick. Like Tyree Wilson, he's definitely not slipping out of the top 10. He's a top 10 pick for sure, very likely a top 5 pick. I have a hard time believing that he falls past the Cardinals at 3. Maybe the Bears do pull the trigger and take him at 1. But we will see. I think Will Anderson is a guy that could dominate at the combine. His 40 time to me will be interesting. I think he is pretty fast. I don't know if he has like elite speed. I think if he does run a mind-blowing time, I think maybe he does. Maybe his odds, skyrocket up as far as the number one pick in the draft is concerned. But I'll wrap with that, guys. That's the top 5 edge rushers that's my top 5 edge rushers for the 2023 NFL draft. Make sure to stay tuned. We're going to do some more draft rankings. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Big Time Football Talk. Make sure to stay tuned for more clips and episodes from the show. Till next time, peace.